The guys over at Dreams managed to hook me up with an interview with Xander, the lead developer on Vendetta Forever, the game you're seeing on screen right now. This is a mashup of a whole host of VR games mixed in with a lot of new, fresh ideas that are, to put it bluntly, looking pretty awesome. This game utilizes low kill motion, an aspect of locomotion where you kill an enemy, you grab their gun, and suddenly you're teleported to where they are in the arena. So on and so forth until you complete one of the game's 60 levels and rinse and repeat throughout all the levels until you've finished. I got to sit down with Xander and discuss local motion, the game in general, the PSVR2 mechanics and features that are going to be implemented, and also how hard it is to port to a couple of different platforms, PSVR2 included. So, for a load of information about the game, just a nice chat with me and Xander, and some insight on PSVR2 as a platform, sit down, relax, and let's get stuck in. Once again, yeah, thank you for coming here and let me speak to you about Vendetta Forever, because it's one of the games this month. Obviously, there's a lot of big stuff coming out, but it's kind of snuck up and crept up on us, and it's one that's really, really exciting. So just to kick us off, well, I know who you are, but for the sake of everybody else, who are you? What do you do? Why are you interested in VR? What is your previous VR experience?
Really. Yes, I'm Xander Deja. I am the creator and sole sort of developer on Vendetta Forever. Got a couple friends that I got together to do art and audio, some concept as well, that joined me on this project. But I'm the sort of designer, engineer, UI artist versus legal tax,
Wearing a
the
lot of
rest of
hats, yeah.
Yeah. So very small studio,
Mhm.
but it's been a wild ride and blast. I love VR. I've been a VR dev. Pretty much my first job was VR back in like 2016. And I think ever since, putting on a Google Cardboard and just seeing like stereo vision on a phone for the first time, I was like, yo, okay, this is where it's at. Like I can see some wacky stuff happening here, and it's just so different. It's such an interesting medium that just like the Wild West of video games. So, I wanted to be a game developer ever since coming out of college, but seeing the kind of AAA industry landscape getting a little stagnant, it was a breath of fresh air to see VR as this whole new medium that you could really get crazy in. So I worked at a very random small startup down in California, doing sort of one-off prototypes for companies interested in doing VR stuff. We got more onto the game side. Worked on some in the mobile industry for a little bit before going to Lucasfilm at ILM X Lab. I think they're now called ILM Immersive. But I worked on the Vader Immortal trilogy.
Yeah, no, a lot
Familiar
of
with
people
those?
recognize that. Yeah, they'll recognize that. Fantastic
Yeah.
games.
And then Tales from the Galaxy's Edge, the kind of follow up to those. I was the lead gameplay engineer. I worked on some cool location based stuff like Avengers and Wreck It Ralph IP. Then I went to Meta for a little bit, and then I started this because I just really wanted to make my own game.
So you've,
Something that
you've
I could
basically been
hopefully,
around, yeah, a lot in terms of you're not somebody who is in a studio and thinks there's just money in VR. I'm gonna make something. You actually want to push this forward, and I mean you've got the resume, haven't you, in terms of everything before. So that's fantastic to hear. I know a lot of people have been speaking about the upcoming game, Vendetta Forever, but in terms of you as a person, that's something that that's the reason that we're here having this chat, and that's fantastic to hear. I did actually play. I think it was one of the Star Wars like location-based immersive things back in a couple years ago in London. It was with the backpacks and the headset and
yep,
everything like that.
the
Um,
Empire.
yeah, it was properly good. Obviously the tech's come on loads since then, but now you're in the household. This is a game anyone can buy, really. So you kind of spoke a little bit on it just then, but as for your role in the game, in terms of its development, you're the lead, so everything's kind of put on you. You've got other people helping you, but for the most part, this is a big effort from you, right?
Yes, indeed. I'm not sure if you've heard about Bang Bang Slice, but that was sort of the prototype version of this that I put
Hmm.
out about 2 years ago, maybe. And that was basically a gray box version of this game with extremely limited, like, models and textures and lighting and sort of that stuff. But the game design itself was has not changed a ton since then. It's comes from a pretty solid base. So yeah, I came up with the concept for the game. I wrote all the code, designed all the levels, sort of did all the lighting, all the UI assets, all of the models, a couple of the level 3 models, a lot of the SFX, and sort of just put the whole thing together. So yeah, wearing a lot of hats here,
Yeah.
but I'm
Yeah.
constantly making like prototype games,
Mm-hmm.
and side projects for myself. So I'm pretty familiar with kind of the whole pipeline of game development.
Yeah, and especially like we'll talk initially about the game as a whole, but in terms of we'll get onto some PSVR2 centric stuff later because that is obviously the focus of the content that I do. But it's good to hear you have a knowledge of the entire pipeline. So when we get onto that, we'll be able to kind of dig into that a bit more. So for the game itself, as I've been playing through it, yeah, the time of this interview going out, I probably won't be able to say really much about what I think of it, but playing through the game, there's a lot of clear inspirations from other VR titles, and it's something that is quite positive this year. As I've spoken to a lot of devs who have said that they've taken things from other games that they've loved and they've worked them in a different way into their own projects, and that shows a clear like passion for virtual reality, and I can see that in Vendetta Forever. So are there any like VR games or even like flat games that some other like PSVR2 owners who are watching this would recognize and be able to kind of latch onto that inspired you for this game? So what other titles really influenced this one?
I would say the kind of core concept of local motion was somewhat mostly like an original idea of how to get moving in VR without kind of falling back on the stupid point teleport or the smooth locomotion, which I'm not a huge fan of. So trying to come up with something a little more imaginative. And after having played Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, the kind of mechanic where you can really cross a solid distance, glory kill someone, move on to the next one, and almost like traverse the whole map, just glory killing along the way. I thought that was so cool, so fun, so satisfying. So that was the biggest mechanical inspiration for the locomotion system in Vendetta Forever. Clearly, everybody sees the super hot and pistol whip aesthetic inspiration, and that to some degree is true. I'm a huge fan of both those games. I love the art style. I love non-photorealistic rendering. I like very stylized things. So I thought, what if you could like do the mechanics of Doom but make it look like super hot pistol whip? So taking all those things together, throw in a bunch of action movies, and you got something that's similar to Vendetta Forever. There's a ton of VR games that I'm playing constantly. The one that comes to mind is actually Gun Club VR. If you've ever heard of that.
Yeah. Back on PSVR1, so many hours in there.
Yeah. Such satisfying like gun mechanics, just the reloading. It's all very accurate, and just the fidelity of the models and stuff. So I wanted to kind of bring a bit of that in there. And I really like the kind of projectile physics in Pistol Whip, where it's forgiving with a bit of auto aim, but you also have a very clear sense of when enemy bolts are coming at you, rather than just seeing a muzzle flash and getting damaged without being able to sort of dodge it. So things I've incorporated into all my past projects, and especially this one. But I can't say there's any one clear, like, I wanted to do this and this and this together. It was with me taking little things that I really liked and thought, okay, I like the very core of this concept of like glory killing and sort of moving. And I was like, what if it was just purely motion through killing, or point to point kind of speed running? I regret to say that on White was not an influence, because I only started playing it a couple, like 6 months ago or so.
Yeah.
And after having played it, I'm like, damn, my game really is Neon White in VR. So I can't say it was an influence, but I love that game and I highly recommend playing it. It's brilliant.
Yeah. So I that's a lot of titles in there. There are little things taken from. I think the main thing that's going to differentiate this, as you said, though, is the local motion. I haven't really seen anything like that in VR before, and I will do a little bit before the interview opens up in the video saying about the game and local motion and everything like that, and basically pitching that. But yeah, as a mechanic, it is a way of moving by grabbing the opponent that you just killed, their weapon, and then you get to kill another, and so on and so forth until you complete the levels. And it is like, I can see that Doom inspiration 100%, because it reminds me a bit of like Doom VFR on the old PSVR1, but I always felt like there was something missing in terms of the flow for that. But here, it's like from all the trailers, you know, and from all of the stuff you've been saying, it seems to be that kind of refined, which is really, really exciting. So we talked a bit about VR game inspirations, but there are a lot of like film tropes you can see from the footage you put out in terms of there's a lot of inspirations about locations and stuff like that. What like tropes, either, you know, growing up, a lot of people love watching those films. I know I did, and a lot of that has influenced my work in anything that I've done. What kind of tropes and locations and like gun and weapon inclusions did really kind of came in to inspire you for this one in terms of what is included into the game? Because obviously you can't have a massive scope of everything most of the time, but you must have some favorites that you've really put in here in terms of location and weapons and situations.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, growing up, I was hooked on 80s, 90s action movies, early 2000s, and just kind of the superhero kind of protagonist that just plows through hordes of enemies. Again, very Doom-like. And I'm like, yes, I loved just kind of the speed and the puzzle nature of being like so outnumbered and often outgunned. And if you're in, say, like a kitchen or a warehouse, and you've got like 50 enemies, like overwhelming odds, how do you sort of traverse this environment while taking out all your foes to get to the MacGuffin or the missile or the golden idol, what have you? So yeah, just kind of the choreography of action scenes has always been so interesting to me, because it's all just this big setup of like, yeah, how can we take this environment that's somewhat familiar to most people and stage just the most awesome fight scene in it, taking stuff from, you know, Jackie Chan movies where, you know, he uses the environment to improvise, you know, either weapons or defensive things or just like excellent little setups. Taking stuff like that, we're like, okay, what kind of improvised weapons might I find in like an apartment or a restaurant or whatever, and kind of make it part of the battle. And again, like having familiar locations that people might recognize is kind of helps ground you in the scene, while also taking it to such like weird, interesting, crazy heights of like, whoa, I never thought like this pizza place would have been an awesome scene for, you know, a fight. Like, so inspiration is abound everywhere. You just got to look around and think like, all right, how do I subvert this into something nuts? And yeah, it's a blast to do so, especially when you are making a game with very, very few rules.
Yeah, I can definitely see, like, especially from the locations and everything like that, going through the game, there are a couple moments where you're like, this is basically what I watched as a kid, but now I'm in it. So yeah, that's really awesome to hear. That's like clearly something you're passionate about. And I know a lot of like the demographic for, I'm just in the PSVR2 community most of the time, but with some other VR communities as well. There are a lot of people in there who love that sort of action movie. So hopefully this will really kind of hit home for them. So yeah, moving on just quickly from that. You're porting to PSVR2. Obviously, that's a very thumbs up from me. Love the platform. All VR is great, but you know, specializing in that one in particular. But when porting to different platforms like Quest, like PSVR2, like Steam, how difficult is that from a developer standpoint? Because I play games, I love games. I've never developed a game in my life. I've never shipped a game in my life. What challenges do you face really with trying to get it up and running on different platforms that all require different things?
Yes. In general, yeah, it's hard, man. It's a slog to get it on one platform, let alone, you know, 3 to 5. But you can sort of, as a developer, you can kind of help yourself out from the get-go by not tying yourself too deeply to any one particular platform. Also, you know, modern engines like Unity and Unreal are pretty good at letting you sort of build the game agnostic of the platform and deploy to each one specifically. So as long as you're doing that from the get-go, it's not horrible, but a lot of times you never know if a project is going to end up on Pico or PSVR or Quest. So switching halfway is a nightmare, and I don't recommend doing that. But yeah, just the main difficulty, if you know ahead of time, yeah, I'm going to do this on as many platforms as I can, I'm going to be platform agnostic. you're still dealing with, especially in the VR world, such a massive range of capabilities where, I could be running on a PS5 with tons of processing power relatively to a Quest. You could be targeting a PC with, 40, like 54080s in it, or maybe a very weak PC. And then you're running on Quest 2. If you want to support the lowest denominator, Quest 2 is essentially an old Android phone that has to run everything 90 hertz, so like triple normal game frame rate, and you have to render everything twice with the stereo vision. So it's like 6 times harder on something that's 10 times weaker. So you're going all the way from that to a PS5, and you're like, oh god, okay. It's very hard to make something that works on all those things, especially if you have a very photorealistic, kind of graphically intense game. See the disparity between those platforms immediately. Like thinking of Zero Caliber, like Onward, where you can cross-play on PlayStation and Quest, and the graphical difference is massive. So with sort of much less intense textures, for instance, really helps kind of keep parity without sacrificing, I think, too much artistic integrity. But yeah, it gets very confusing in your head when you're juggling so many platforms, and you're like, okay, PlayStation and Quest Pro have eye tracking. Only PlayStation has resistive triggers, but then I've got completely different controller orientations on Steam versus PlayStation versus Quest. They all have different button inputs. It gets overwhelming very quickly. So
yeah. As for those, yeah, as you said, not horrible is the quote I'll take from that. If you're playing from the start, but still not perfect. But you did touch on the capacitive or adaptive triggers on PlayStation, on PSVR2. So like features like that, in terms of implementation, is it something? I guess it varies, like developer to developer. Who cares about what? But is that something you kind of think about from the very beginning in terms of, I've got these different types of weapons, I want to make sure they have adaptive triggers, I want to make sure, I'm using eye tracking or I'm using headset rumble or whatever you want to use. Is that something that's set in your head as a dev from the start, or is it more you get towards the later stages in development cycle and you're like, well, I might as well add them in because they're a feature on the platform?
So I'll be honest, when I started this game, I didn't know what platforms I was going to be targeting. I was thinking definitely PC VR and definitely Quest, because that's what I had and I had the most experience with it. But once I was aware of that we could do a PSVR version and we would do a PSVR version, I said, I want to use all those capabilities. I want to use the resistive triggers because it's my favorite thing on those PS5 controllers. It's made for beautiful like pulse, and I have a lot of guns in the game, so I thought that feel of having every gun have just a little bit different trigger pull, a little bit different break to kind of mimic the physical ones. But why not do it? Like, if it's there, you got to do it. And tracking was a little harder to work in because there's not too many direct mechanics that use eye tracking aside from like foveated rendering. But I do have a couple features such as like bullet curving and targeting with the sword and stuff that really benefits from being able to use your eyes. I got a Quest Pro back when it came out just to test eye tracking stuff, thinking, this is going to go on PlayStation someday. This is cool stuff. And yeah, the headset rumble is great too. I actually have a B-haptics kit for Quest, and I love the face rumble. It's great. If you ever get hit in the face by a knife, like that is that's what that's made for, man. That's why I put that in, just to make sure you get a nice head rumble.
That's
it's tons of fun to include all this stuff, and these are the features that really set the platform apart for being like, yeah, you guys really care about gaming, like theoretically.
Yeah, so that's fantastic to hear. Like in terms of you have a clear vision of what you want to be used where, rather than just throwing it all in there, which I have seen from developers in the past where they've kind of just stuck it on as a thing. But it is the public service announcement. That's not how it is here. Yes. So yeah, that's great to hear. For like the game in general, it's coming out. What's the date today? The 16th. So in under a week. Probably it's in less than under a week when this goes out in terms of an interview. But once it's out there, is your brain thinking you want to expand with any more like levels? The game has a hefty amount of content, of course, but would you like to expand? Have you got any more ideas, or would you rather decide that you want to go on to a next project that's very different, or do you want to maybe expand the low kill motion to something else? There's a lot of options here. Obviously, you may not be able to talk about or want to talk about anything that soon, since the game isn't even out yet. But it's always exciting to see something like this. And then, do you have a vision for what's next?
Yes. So first off, I'm absolutely committed to expanding Vendetta Forever. When I was first building it, I thought, all right, I'll make like 25 levels. That sounds like a good number of levels. And then I hit 25 and went, I mean, I never did that other level that I really want to do. Let's do 30. Let's do 40. Let's do 50. And I said, I'm going to ship with 50 levels. But I can't stop. You know, I literally would go to, went to a roller rink, and the building it was in was like this old church. And I'm like, whoa, this is an awesome environment. And immediately I'm like, okay, so you start outside, you kill the guy in the door, you got to go in a circle around here, you go upstairs, zip line across, you go down. And I'm like, boom, I'm building a new level already. So up to 60 levels for launch. And yeah, I've got a long list of ideas. Got a long list of prototypes. So I'm not sure if I'm allowed to commit to saying there will be more levels, but I want to make more levels, and I will be making more levels. Whether y'all get them or not is up to how many people buy the game. So please buy it, and you'll get more levels for sure.
Buy the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome to hear, because it's not necessarily something that's like needed for every release that's out there, but it does show confidence in the idea that you've got, and kind of the game that you've made, when you're willing to say, I'd love to keep going with this idea. It's got legs, you know. So yeah, that's music to my ears. So in terms of the game's going out into the current VR landscape, I think it's definitely got the mechanics to do well 100%. But as the VR landscape at the moment, what do you, as a solo, almost solo developer, a lot of the stuff is from you. In terms of the landscape as a whole, how viable is getting into virtual reality as a dev? What's kind of your outlook on VR as a whole at the moment? Because it's very much still in its like infancy, but then we're also getting projects like this which are pushing the boundary in terms of new mechanics that we never even thought of before. So in terms of finding your feet as a like maybe a smaller dev or a solo dev, what is your outlook on the industry as a whole, not just like PlayStation VR, but everything in general? Where do you think it's gonna go, if you can put a prediction out there?
Oof. Well, to start, my advice to devs thinking about getting into VR, I will say it's probably one of the most difficult gaming areas to go into. The market's relatively tiny compared to console, PC, and mobile. The development work is extremely intense because there's a lot of unknowns, like even just how to move around. You know, joystick movement only became somewhat mainstream in the last couple of years, where, you know, previously most people thought, oh, it's going to make you motion sick, don't do it. Platforms are very widely in capabilities, scope, availability, price, so it's extra work there. And a lot of people just aren't interested in it, or naturally will get motion sick doing it. So it's really difficult. But I will say, I've been doing this for almost 10 years now, and it is the most satisfying thing ever, because it's just damn fun, man. It's the coolest thing to play. Like, just getting in it, moving around, moving your hands, reaching out, grabbing stuff. It's definitely the coolest thing. And the first time I put on like a Rift DK2 or a HTC Vive, immediately I was like, holy shit, how can this not be the future?
Yeah, I had exactly the same with the Vive before, because I didn't own one of my friends did. And I don't even want to think about how many years ago that was now, because it's been a while. But yeah, putting on the headset for the first time, playing games like Pavlov when that first came out, and the original Arizona Sunshine as well. Looking back on it now, you look at it and go, well, that's like primitive VR, as we say now. It's right. You can see the bone works of everything that's going to come later, but at that time it was like the most exciting thing. And then PlayStation VR was the next step for me, and you were stuck with those awful light tracked controllers. But even then, you saw like the potential, right? So you think it's it's one of the most exciting avenues of gaming at the moment.
Yes, 100%. Like, to me, if we can get people over the motion sickness hump, I know the barrier to entry now is like lowest it's ever been. You know, PSVR being as affordable as it is on such a capable platform is amazing. You know, Meta's doing great work with Quest 3S being so cheap.
Yeah.
It's that, to me, that's like one of the keys to getting in there. But like a lot of people stress, oh yeah, you know, getting a sub $300 headset is going to open up the industry to a lot more players. And I think that's definitely part of it. But really good content is I think the biggest driver. Like having a wealth of games. Like there are tons of VR games out there, but certainly pales into comparison to, you know, console or PC stuff. But the breadth of VR, I think, has the most potential in that you're not just, you know, going to have hundreds and hundreds of games or, you know, hero shooters or loot box stuff. You can really do so much stuff, like to play as, you know, like Cooking Mama. I don't know if you play Cooking Mama.
Yeah,
I love
on the
cooking
DS.
games.
Yeah.
Cooking games in VR is like instantly so much more satisfying than on console, and there's so much weird stuff you can do. Like I want a Ant-Man style game where I can shrink down and get huge, like stuff that just doesn't quite work as well in console. So I think people should really need to just experiment and do crazy stuff, like do really wacky stuff that is impossible on flat screen. And that's the kind of content I think that will really drive us forward. And as long as the headset manufacturers continue to support it as a gaming console, as a platform, you know, rather than, oh, it's a hybrid thing that you can do work in and stuff. And I'm like, sure, great, that's great. But you really need to support the fact that it's popular because of games.
Yeah.
And continuing to make it a gaming first platform, or at least make gaming not a second class citizen. Stuff like the resistive triggers, the head haptics on the PlayStation VR, like those are the little touches that are like, yes, this is super cool for gaming. I think that the more everyone collectively says, yeah, this is a great medium with such limitless possibilities, let's really take advantage of it. That's what's gonna really make it move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. And I think a nice note to end on, because that is the end of my question list, but I think you've done that in terms of finding something fun with this idea. From what you've said today, it seems like this is going to be an exciting addition to the PSVR2 lineup for most people watching this, and also just a good addition to the VR lineup as a whole for the rest of the community. But thank you so much for your time. It's basically been like a bit eye-opening in terms of the development process, and it's been just lovely to catch up with you about the game. Looking forward to it when it comes out on the 23rd, I want to say. I got that right.
24th.
UK date. 24th. Yeah. Almost there. Oops. But yeah.
Thanks so much for having me, man. Yeah. This was a blast talking to you, and thank you for playing. I'm really excited for everyone out there to play the full game. There's so much crazy stuff in there, and I've got crazier ideas coming up, so stay tuned.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.